Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of a ruler so insane, so terrifying, that he laughed while his entire court dropped dead around him? No, this isn't some Game of Thrones script. This actually happened. A real king, a real massacre. And the truth is darker than any fantasy ever written. Today, we're going to uncover the twisted story of a monarch so obsessed with loyalty, so paranoid about betrayal, that he orchestrated the most horrifying dinner party in royal history. This is the story of the Mad King, the one who killed his entire court, and laughed while doing it. And trust me, once you hear what happened behind those palace walls, you'll never look at history the same way again. So sit back, lean in, and prepare for one of the darkest, most disturbing royal tales you've never been told. It started like all great tragedies, with fire. Before the king ever sat on the throne, he was just a boy. A quiet one, observant, with eyes too old for his age. He watched his father rule with an iron fist, but what scarred him most was what happened the day rebels set fire to the capital. The smoke choked the sky. The palace gates melted in the heat. And the boy, just 11 years old, watched from a hidden chamber as his older brother, the rightful heir, was dragged into the courtyard and executed in front of the flames. The rebels didn't find the boy, but they left a message. No more kings. Except there would be another king, and that boy, who stared at the charred crown on his father's corpse, would never forget the smell of burning flesh, or the sound of laughter as the rebels vanished into the night. From that moment on, something shifted in him. Loyalty was no longer a virtue. It was a weapon. And betrayal? Betrayal became his obsession. By the time he came of age, the kingdom was barely holding together. Famine, corruption, rebellion after rebellion. But the boy, now king, wasn't interested in solving problems. He wanted control. He surrounded himself with advisors he didn't trust, hired spies to spy on other spies, changed passwords daily, rotated his guards every 6 hours. Even the royal cook was executed for serving fish 2 nights in a row. And then the voices started. Servants said they heard him pacing at night, talking to no one, whispering names, lists, scribbling in notebooks that no one ever saw twice. He'd stare at courtiers for minutes in silence, then burst into laughter and call for wine. Some say it was paranoia. Others, that it was something darker, that the fire from his childhood had left more than just scars on his skin. Either way, the king became obsessed with one thing, purging his court of traitors. And he had a plan. A very specific plan. It was supposed to be a celebration. The harvest had come early. The wars in the north were finally over. And to mark the occasion, the king announced a grand royal feast. Everyone was invited. Nobles, knights, scholars, even foreign dignitaries. The hall was decorated in gold and red. Massive chandeliers dripped with wax. Musicians played songs no one recognized. And in the center of it all, the king, smiling. That's what unsettled people most. He didn't smile, but that night he grinned from ear to ear. Guests were served exotic dishes, endless wine. Toasts were made, jokes were told, and then the doors slammed shut. Not metaphorically, literally. Iron bolts slid into place, guards posted at every entrance, and the king, still smiling, stood and raised his goblet. "To loyalty," he said. The crowd cheered. Then the coughing began. First one, then another, then dozens. People dropped to the floor, clawing at their throats, foam spilling from their mouths, eyes bulging. Some tried to run. Others collapsed onto banquet tables. The king? He just sat down and laughed. It wasn't poison in the wine. It was in the candles, special wax, released slowly over hours, tasteless, odorless, but deadly in enclosed spaces. The king didn't drink, didn't eat. He had known, he had planned it. The entire court wiped out in a single evening. Morning came. The castle gates remained shut. Messengers sent to deliver news were never heard from again. And when finally, after days, the royal guards allowed entry, what they found was pure horror. Bodies slumped over chairs, some frozen in expressions of confusion. Others, mouths still open mid-scream. The king sat on his throne, alive, alone, and humming. He declared that the traitors had been purged, that the kingdom was now pure, and that a new era of loyalty would begin. But the people, they were terrified. Whispers spread. Rebellions sparked again. Provinces broke away. And yet the king remained, smiling, waiting, planning his next move. With his court gone, the king needed advisors, so he created new ones. Literally, he ordered mannequins dressed in court robes, gave them names, held meetings, argued with them, punished them. One mannequin, called Lord Virel, was beheaded publicly for plotting treason. Another was crowned Grand Architect and given a chamber in the East Wing. Servants were forced to bow to these lifeless figures. Guards had to announce their presence. It became a theater of madness. And yet, through this madness, the king continued to rule. Taxes were collected, wars were declared, and somehow the kingdom stumbled forward. Because fear, it turns out, is a powerful glue, and the king knew how to use it. There's one room in the castle that was never mentioned in maps, never listed in blueprints. They called it the Mirror Room, because that's all it contained. Hundreds of mirrors, floor to ceiling, angled, distorted, warped. It was the king's sanctuary, his confessional, his hell. Servants reported hearing screams from inside, muffled sobs, laughter that turned to shrieks. No one was allowed in. Until one night, a young maid, curious and bold, slipped inside. What she saw changed her forever. The king, sitting cross-legged, surrounded by mirrors, talking to himself, crying, then laughing, then threatening. Something. He saw reflections of people who weren't there, accused them of betrayal, begged for forgiveness, then stabbed the air with a dagger. She ran, told no one, left the palace the next day, and never returned. But she wrote it all down, and that account was smuggled out during the revolution. Proof, some say, that the king wasn't just mad. He was haunted. You can only push people so far. After the massacre, after the puppet council, after the whispers of demons in the mirror room, the people had had enough. A resistance formed, quietly. In taverns, in marketplaces, in the fields. Farmers became messengers. Bakers hid weapons in flour sacks. Former knights trained teenagers in secret. And at the center of it all, a woman. Elira, the silent queen. Yes, she returns. But to understand what she did, we need to understand her. They called her Elira, the queen who never smiled, the woman whose footsteps never echoed. If the king was fire and thunder, she was the silent shadow behind the throne. And for years, no one could figure her out. Elira had come from a distant kingdom, promised as part of a peace treaty that was supposed to calm the fires of war. But little did anyone know, she was trading one prison for another. She was married to the Mad King at just 17, and even on her wedding day she seemed distant, eyes unfocused, lips pressed into a permanent line. Most queens try to win favor with the court. Elira didn't care. She didn't host tea ceremonies, didn't ride beside her husband during royal parades. Instead, she walked the palace halls alone, always dressed in black velvet, her hands gloved, her eyes lined with sadness. But Elira had a secret. She was smarter than anyone gave her credit for, and she was watching, carefully, as the kingdom unraveled. She kept journals, hundreds of pages now preserved in broken vaults below what remains of the capital. And inside those journals, a record of every delusion, every breakdown, every name the king whispered when no one else was listening. She saw it coming. The court didn't believe her warnings. When she told them the king was preparing something, that he believed the nobles were conspiring with demons, that he thought voices were speaking through the walls, they laughed, called her hysterical, delusional herself. And then the feast happened. Elira survived it. Why? Because she never drank the wine. Because she never left her seat. Because she had memorized the layout of the entire palace and slipped away the moment the doors locked. She watched from the shadows. She saw the horror unfold, and for the first time, she smiled. That smile didn't mean she was happy. It meant she knew this was the only way forward. Because Elira, quiet, broken Elira, was already planning the king's downfall. Some say she poisoned his mind. Others claim she fed his madness. But the truth is more haunting. She simply survived him. And when the resistance stormed the castle, it was Elira who left the door open. Now, this part of the story. This is where things get weird. Even darker. Because while history has a habit of forgetting ghosts, this one refused to fade. See, after the Mad King's death, the castle was stripped of its riches. The royal banners were burned, and new flags were raised in defiance. But something was off. Rooms echoed when they shouldn't have. Servants spoke of missing items, cold drafts where there were no windows, and late at night, strange laughter drifting through the halls. Then came the discovery. A hidden corridor behind the throne room, walls scraped with bare fingernails, symbols burned into stone, and at the very end, a child. He couldn't speak, could barely stand, covered in filth, hair like matted string, and eyes wide like he'd never seen daylight. No one knew how long he'd been there. Some believed he was the king's illegitimate son, hidden away in fear of political backlash. Others said he was a bastard child born from the queen's forbidden affair. But the boy, he remembered things, horrible things. He drew pictures, crude, childish sketches of people being tortured, of masked faces, of the king laughing while holding a candle to someone's face. He showed them a tunnel that led from the dungeon to the main feast hall. A tunnel no one knew existed. And when they finally explored it, they found more bodies. Hundreds. Servants, guards, entertainers, all declared missing over the years. Sacrifices, experiments, puppets in the king's twisted fantasy. The boy was named Kalen. He was taken in by a local priest who tried to raise him in peace. But the trauma never left. He barely spoke, slept with his eyes open. And every now and then, he'd wake up screaming one word: Father. Kalen's story was erased from most records. Officials didn't want survivors. They wanted closure. But in the underbelly of the kingdom, his name became legend. The boy in the walls, the last witness of a reign soaked in blood. And some say he's still alive, because madness like that never really dies. It just finds a new home. You'd think that, after all that, the massacres, the rebellion, the king's execution, people would tear the palace down, burn the throne, and start fresh. But power doesn't let go so easily. The new rulers wanted to keep the castle as a symbol of resilience. They remodeled it. cleaned the blood-stained floors, installed stained glass to cover the broken windows. But the throne? The one the Mad King sat in as he laughed through murder? They didn't destroy it. They put it in a chamber, locked it away, called it a relic. And from the moment they sealed that room, strange things started happening again. The first guard assigned to watch over it went missing. Found 3 days later in the bell tower, mumbling nonsense and scratching the word forgive into the stone with his own fingernails. The next went blind. The one after that lit himself on fire. Eventually, they put up holy symbols, built iron bars around the throne, and sealed the chamber with wax from the high priest's candle. Still, rumors spread that the throne was made from bones, that its cushions were soaked in blood, that the king's spirit still whispered to those who got too close. A historian tried to sit on it once. He started screaming, clawing at his eyes, shouting that he saw the feast and heard the laughter. He died 2 days later from heart failure. They say the throne isn't just haunted, it's cursed. So now it sits, in silence, beneath layers of dust and history. A monument to madness, a reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. And if you ever visit the old capital, you'll see it, locked behind glass, waiting, watching. And if you listen closely, you might just hear the laughter. You've heard of mad kings, but this one wasn't just a tyrant. He was a mirror, a reflection of what happens when fear, trauma, and unchecked power collide. And though centuries have passed, the echoes of his reign still haunt the walls, the people, and the history books that dare to tell the truth. This was the Mad King who killed his entire court, and laughed doing it. And if you think this story is over, oh no. Next time, we dive into the twisted queen who poisoned an entire city just to erase her name from history. This is History Unhinged, where the past was never this dark or this real.